A fighter, for example, needs 2,000 gold to go from first to second level. And the question arises, well, what do they do with all this gold? One of the things that a player may decide to do with all that gold is hire themselves an army. Why should we 5 just go down alone? If I spend my money and hire a bunch of mercenaries, they can go down with us, and we can have a veritable army and just toss these warm bodies in front of us, and we want to make everything easy peasy, lemon squeezy. The answer is, it might not make it as easy as you think. So let me go through a few of the considerations first. There are 2 types of essentially hired help in your BX style game. One is a retainer, and a retainer is a creature could have class levels, and you're limited in the number of retainers you can hire by your charisma. So you can never have more than 3. So you're probably not going to have an army that way. The other kind of hired help you get is a hireling. And hirelings, there are mercenaries. And mercenaries, you can hire essentially as many as you can afford. But there is a caveat. Hirelings don't generally go on adventures. They're doing stuff potentially in the wilderness travel portion, watching your stronghold, taking care of your affairs at your home, all that sort of stuff. They may be folks who are along with you on expedition, but they're not generally going into the dungeons with you. Now, there was a note in the expert set that says, hey, you may want to take your mercenaries, or your players may want to take their mercenaries down into dungeons. If so, the pay rate is much, much, much higher than it would be otherwise. So that's about all the guidance that the expert set gives you. But I think what we can do is look at the guidance that the expert set gives you, along with some of the guidance in the basic set. And this is something that Retro Clones and other OSR style games have kind of built off of, is figuring out what to do in this situation when your party wants to hire a bunch of folks. And the main thing that I do, and I think a lot of other folks do, is that you begin to bargain in these deals with soldier types who are going to go down in dungeons with you to accrue shares of treasure. And this is something that applies to retainers specifically, but I would also apply it to mercenaries who are going down in the dungeon, and that is that they get half a share of treasure. If you only have a couple of retainers or a couple of these sorts of hirelings, it doesn't seem like a big deal, right? 2 hirelings equals essentially 1 full party share. So you go from, if it's a 5-way split, now it's a 6-way split. Yeah, you're going to lose a little bit, but maybe you live with it. But you start adding tens of soldier types into your party, suddenly each one of those tens is now going to be 5 shares. One example I saw on Reddit said, well, what if everyone in the party hired 10 mercenaries and they all went tromping down to the dungeon? Now, yeah, great. You'd have a party of 55, right? 5 players, 10 mercenaries each, 50 mercenaries, 5 party members. But that means that each person in the party, each player now, is only getting a 30th of the share of treasure, right? Because every 2 mercenaries equals 1 share. So you go from 50 mercenaries, that means 25 shares. Add the other party members, that's 5 shares. 5 shares for them, so that's 30 shares total. So your share, as each one of you players, you're getting a 30th, which means that your 2,000 experience, if we're counting just for loot, to go from first level to second level per BX, now I think you need something like 60,000 gold to get there. Is it doable? Sure, but it's a much bigger task. And that is not even counting all the things that come along with all these hirelings, such as making sure they're all happy, making sure that they're all fed, making sure that they're all housed if they're traveling around with you. Where are you carrying all those rations? You're going to have carts. You're probably going to need to have people watching the carts while you guys are in the dungeon. You're going to need a whole element of expedition support for the logistics, right? And then on top of it, you have all the tomfoolery that's going to happen. If I have to roll 50 reaction rolls or 50 sort of morale checks for these soldiers, chances are you're probably going to have some bad apples in the bunch who, when you pull out the magic ring out of the loot chest and you try to keep it for yourself among the party members, some of those mercs might get an idea that maybe it should be theirs. Or what if they find something in the back of the room and they decide to withhold it from the party. Not to mention that in a confined space in a dungeon, a well-placed magic or other sort of trap could take out a whole slew of these mercenaries. They're level 0, don't have great hit points, don't have great saves, so they are liable to be supremely hampered by spells like sleep. They could be potentially charmed. Goodness knows, a nice fireball gets dropped in there. It's going to run havoc, or say a lightning bolt spell, depending on the level of your adversary. All kinds of other fun things could happen. You're certainly not going to be quiet down there. You're not going to be sneaking up on anybody. Now, the plus side is that having a whole army at your disposal means that as a party, you can take on challenges that you couldn't before. Maybe you'd like to get into more politics and being a band of the hawk type band of mercenaries that's roving around the countryside, A-team style, or on the flip side, roving around the countryside causing havoc. Maybe you want to get into the political land ownership game early and take over a castle or claim some section of wilderness for yourself. There are lots of possibilities there, but it isn't a slam dunk win button to have. Now, there is the classic story of the Tomb of Horrors campaign, in which one of the players sent endless amounts of orcs down into the bowels, and you can certainly do that. I don't have play notes on that game, so I don't know if Gary Gygax, how he and their players handled that mass amount of folks. It could certainly be done, but there are a lot of challenges. It isn't just, oh, look, I have these bodies to put in there. Those bodies are individuals who are going to have their own wants and needs. Sure, I'm not going to have 50 NPC cards written up, but I'm sure as heck going to look at all these folks there, and they're all looking out for themselves. They may end up being more aligned to each other than to you, the player. And what happens if your gang of 5 ends up being hurt or wounded, and now you have 50 armed mercenaries who maybe are taking their chance to say, if we take out these guys, we can run this place, we could take all the loot and go home. These are all questions that should be coming up to your mind when you're dealing with hirelings. That's kind of part of the fun of hirelings in the game, is they're not just automatons, golems for the party to send out robot-like in front of them. They're these elements that have a little bit of not only a cost, but also a little bit of risk involved, because a reaction can go bad. They can fail a morale check at the worst possible time, and maybe use the party to take up a task that is a little bit above your pay grade, but you figure out, you think, hey, we got it because we got 50 men. And then when you get down to it, say it's a dragon's lair, and there's the dragon, and that morale just flows away, and they begin to run and panic. It'll be fun, but it might not be the win button you think it is. Anyhow, that's all I got. Game on. Talk to you later.